It all happened in August of 2005, when the Hurricane Katrina terrorized the cities. An entire class and their teachers were stranded in their school that was up on a hill and very far from anyone's reach. There were a young group of villagers in the boondocks without any form of communication to the other communities. As the storm went on for days, they remained trapped on the hill while surrounded by the view of their homes beneath the flood. What made matters worse was the unfortunate incidents that happened inside the school grounds. While everybody was overwhelmed by despair and hunger, a small group of unwelcome guests suddenly appeared to find food and shelter. As the noise of whistling storm winds and heavy rain enshrouded the scene, a few people were violently killed inside of the school. The school was built on top of an uninhabited hill in order to reach the isolated communities around the area. It was donated and managed by a group of volunteers who wanted to give the villagers a proper education. Classes were handled by the same people, and they often stayed in that location for days since going there required too much time and effort. The only way to reach the hill was by foot. The road that was passable by vehicle was roughly 200 miles away, and the only way to cross the river which divided the land was through a wooden bridge. A class was in session when the devastating storm suddenly came. The students were advised to wait it out since it was too dangerous to travel such a difficult terrain under those conditions. It was already a challenge getting there to begin with, and it was made even worse by the wet soil and potential landslides. Unfortunately, the storm lasted far longer than they had anticipated. It kept raining heavily for days. There wasn't any network connection nor a radio within the area. They didn't see nor hear any warning about Katrina. For the people of this far land, it was an unprecedented calamity. When the dam overflowed, the river went wild and decimated the bridge. Several houses in different villages were swept by the flood along with their livelihood. After a few more days of heavy rain and strong winds, the lowlands completely disappeared and lives were lost. Luckily, the school was on a higher elevation. With no place to go nor any means to leave, the students and the volunteers were stranded on the hill. However, they were not the only ones. Aside from the distance and challenging terrain, one of the reasons why people didn't come often in this deciduous land was because of the rumors about the rebels who lived there. This was proven true when they showed up in front of the school while in search for a place to stay. 5 armed individuals asked, or rather demanded, for food and shelter. They were quite displeased with what the canteen had to offer since the students and the faculty had been eating through their very limited supplies for 5 days already. There were 22 villagers in the class, ranging from 13 to 18 years old at the time, and 3 volunteers were looking after them. With just a few potatoes and cobs of corn remaining, they wouldn't last for more than 3 days. However, the rebels who forced their way in just ravaged the food without any consideration. They behaved as if they haven't eaten for days. One of the teachers was a man in his late 30s named Harold Garcia, and this unfortunate circumstance was undoubtedly the worst challenge he ever had to face in the field. The volunteers felt deeply responsible for their students' well-being, but there was nothing much they could do against a group of fully armed men. The other 2 teachers, Helen and Grace, were too afraid to say anything, but Harold approached the rebels in their behalf. He politely asked them to leave some food for the students, but the inconsiderate men rudely brushed him off. The rebels completely invaded the school and ordered the teachers and the students to stay inside their classroom. They rummaged the entire building to find anything that was worth stealing while also ruining what they deemed worthless. They destroyed the products and the handmade gifts that the villagers had given to the volunteers as a token of appreciation. The students cried in fear, and there was nothing that the teachers could do but to calm them down. With all the noise that they were hearing, it was hard to be at ease. Along with the violent storm outside and the sound of things breaking, the students and the teachers were all cornered by the danger of nature and cold-blooded people. With the threat behind the doors of the classroom and lack of food, all they could do was pray and hope for the storm to end soon. Sadly, another tragedy befell upon them on the following night. While everybody else was asleep, one of the younger students had a nightmare and woke up crying. Teacher Grace came to her side. As sad as it may seem, the nightmare that he had was not far from their current situation. The student dreamt that the rebels suddenly stormed in and attacked them, and those who managed to survive were starved to death. Grace tried to calm him down. She walked out of the classroom to grab a glass of water for the kid. Unfortunately, she never came back. The next morning came, but the skies remained dark. When the students asked where Teacher Grace was, Helen and Harold were immediately alarmed. The student who had a nightmare earlier said that she went out to fetch some water but did not return. Harold walked out of the classroom to look for her, and he saw the rebels standing in front of the entrance with malicious grins on their faces. He asked them if they saw Grace, and their response did not make any sense at all. They claimed that Grace escaped in the middle of the night, but that was quite unthinkable since there was nowhere to go. Harold looked closer and noticed that their boots were filled with mud. They went out of the school while it was still raining hard for some reason. Aside from the mud, one of them had scratch marks on his arms. Harold clenched his fist when he realized what might have happened to Grace. He insistently asked them where she was and what they did to her, but they kept on repeating the same lie. When he began to raise his voice, they hit him on the head with the back of their rifle and pummeled him until he could no longer speak. Harold was dragged back to the classroom filled with bruises and cuts. Helen began to cry while patching up his wounds when she also figured out why Grace disappeared. Along with the tragedy, they were also starving. The rebels kept on breaking things around the school to vent their frustrations for not having any food. The students couldn't do anything but cry and cower in fear. Helpless and in grief, Harold kept on grinding his teeth and clenching his fists the entire day. Between the heavy storm and the heartless rebels, one of which had to be taken care of with his own hands. On the following night, he decided to take action. The storm was hard and loud. Any other sound was being drowned by the noise of the rain hitting the ground and the strong winds. When everybody else was asleep, Harold snuck out of the classroom and grabbed a knife from the kitchen. He saw one of the rebels sleeping at the hallway on his own. He did not hesitate to take this chance, and he stealthily approached him. Any of the rebels could easily overpower Harold, who was a mere volunteer teacher with no fighting experience at all. Fueled by hate and desperation, the kind and caring man was finally pushed to the edge. Darkness and noise were covering for him, and the element of surprise was on his side. He repeatedly drove the kitchen knife through the rebel's neck while covering his mouth. When he was certain that the man was dead, he grabbed his gun and looked for the others. He found two of the other rebels fast asleep inside the faculty office. He carefully snuck in and took the guns away from them. Unfortunately, their positions had made it hard for Harold to kill them swiftly. One of them had a thick jacket over his head which covered his neck and face, while the other had his head leaned over a bag on his chest. Moving any of which might wake them up before Harold could do anything, so he had no choice but to act as fast as he possibly could. He first targeted the man who had a jacket over his face. The rebel covered himself to muffle the noise of the storm. Unfortunately for him, he also didn't see Harold coming because of it. Harold locked his head across his forearm and slid the blade underneath the jacket. He slit his throat so he wouldn't be able to scream, but his legs flailed against the chairs as he was getting cut. The other man was awakened when the chair tipped over, and he saw his fellow rebel choking with his own blood. He tried to grab his gun from the table, but Harold got rid of it earlier. He lunged over him and tried to stab him on the chest, but the rebel was able to grab his arms. He easily overpowered the teacher by driving his knee to his abdomen, and Harold bent over in pain. He was kicked on the head repeatedly, but he endured all of it. When the man tried to twist his arm and take the knife from him, he pulled out another one from his back and stabbed his neck with all his weight behind it. With sheer determination and quick-wittedness, the volunteer teacher was able to take out 3 of the rebels on his own. Unfortunately, they made a lot of noise which alerted the remaining 2. The remaining rebels rushed to the faculty office to see what was going on, and they were taken aback when they saw their comrades lying dead on the floor. Their guns were missing, and so was the attacker. They went to the classroom where they kept the teachers and the students, but they were no longer there. Harold ran back to the classroom before the rebels made it to the faculty office. He knew that the remaining rebels would be coming for them, and so they escaped from the back door and ran towards the stockhouse a few feet away from the school building. However, there was nowhere else to go from there, and the rebels would also come there shortly after. For the sake of the students, Harold decided to go back and face the 2 rebels head-on. Armed with an automatic rifle which he got from the other men he killed, he charged towards them while firing. Harold never fired a gun before, and he could not handle the recoil of the rifle. As the rifle was repeatedly jolting against his shoulder, he emptied the magazine without aiming properly. The rebels were taken by surprise and received some of his shots. One was grazed on his arm while the other got shot on his leg. Unfortunately for Harold, none of them were fatal wounds, and they were able to fire back at him. Harold was shot in the chest twice, and one got him right on the head. Despite of his remarkable resolve, the volunteer teacher simply did not have the skill to stand against the rebels on a gunfight. After a long night of killing, the dawn finally came. Coincidentally, the storm had passed as well. Knowing that a rescue might come for the students soon, the two remaining rebels decided to leave immediately. As the long-awaited sun broke through the dark clouds, the students felt saved in many ways. They wept for their lost and for the new day that came too late for Harold Garcia. Helen told their families what happened in the school during the storm. Whether Harold's actions were justified or not, he fought for their sake. A few days after the flood had gone down, they found the body of Grace. Both of them were buried at the foot of the hill, and the villagers began to rebuild.